You're doing very well. Very good clapping. Excellent work. After the brilliance of the Spring Symphony, this number 2 is another world altogether. That's partly because it's not really number 2, it's actually number 3. It's a little bit confusing, but he wrote number 4 second. But it didn't go very well, and he changed it. And in 1841 he wrote it, but he didn't publish it until after 1851, so he called it number 4. So actually number 2 is actually number 3. And so it's quite a lot later than 1841, it's 1845, 6. And that's why it's another world, because Schumann, as I mentioned, was manic depressive. His whole life he suffered terrible depressions, illness, anxiety, exhaustion. The worst of these so far was in 1845, when he was very, very depressed. Later, of course, he became suicidal. After 1851, he threw himself into the Rhine, and soon asked to be put in an asylum, and he died insane at the age of 46. A great loss. This was the beginning. This is where you first hear it really in the music. In 1845, he said that he studied a great deal of Bach, enormous amount of Bach. He played a lot of the pieces for keyboard, and he wrote, in fact, 6 organ preludes on the organ fugues on the letters B, A, C, H. B, A, C, H is the German for bilateral. So he was full of Bach, and he said that writing the Bach, playing the Bach, and writing the symphony brought him back to life again, brought him back to being normal by the end of 1846. Schumann was not just a great composer, he was also a great writer. He edited his Zeitschrift für Musik. He wrote a lot of stuff. He wrote great reviews of Berlioz's work, of Chopin's work, and he was very generous about other people's work, but also he wanted to increase the purity of German music. When he was writing, he often spoke about 2 characters which he had invented, Florestan and Eusebius. They were 2 sides of his personality, really. Florestan was, of course, the hero of Beethoven's Fidelio. And Eusebius was actually a monk in the 5th or 6th century Christian monk. Very, very quiet, somber, humble man, you know. Florestan was a happy and generous, and Eusebius was always doubting. And this symphony, it seems to me, absolutely illustrates the 2 sides of his personality. And you'll see how, as the symphony progresses, the 2 sides come out, and gradually, in the last movement, they're joined together. And his polar disorder is, for the moment, restored. Everything is wonderful by the end of the last movement. Already in the first movement, you hear straight away Florestan and Eusebius. You hear a very dark, brooding music from the strings, and from the horns and the trumpets, a fanfare. Bam, bam, ba, ba, which is actually the same as the opening of Haydn's last symphony, number 104. So he's also expressing his wish to connect himself with the great classical composers. So Eusebius and Florestan are there together in the slow introduction. In the allegro that follows, fast movement, it's very nervous and very worrying. The Eusebius is disturbed. And gradually various different parts appear, but it's still quite disturbed. The second movement also is rather worrying, rather obsessive. But like in this last symphony, there are two trios in the scherzo. The first one is Florestan being cheerful, happy, but the second one is Eusebius being doubtful, and also you actually feel the presence of Bach because there's a walking bass, which is very, very typical of Bach. It's in his very first cantata, with a chorale on the top. And there is this chorale and the walking bass just like that in this second trio. And the letters B-A-C-H, B-A-C-H recur several times. I'm sure you'll notice it. It's not easy to get, but it is there. So that's a Eusebius motto. And so the scherzo ends. The third movement, beautiful, beautiful, slow movement, very sad, very Eusebian, is actually a quotation from Bach, from a trio in the Musikalische Oper, the musical offering, for flute, violin, and continuo. He actually uses it. So again, it's Eusebius and Bach, very, very sad and beautiful music. Then you get to the last movement. That's the most extraordinary movement of all, and one of the most amazing movements in the whole 19th century. It starts with Florestan in full charge. He said, "It's time I took over. It's an absurd situation. Eusebius, shut up. We're going to have some happy music." And off they go. All Florestan, all Florestan. And he goes on for quite a long time. But then it gradually comes to an end. It suddenly stops in the middle. You're not allowed to do that in a symphony. Not allowed to stop. And then some quiet music from the oboe and the wind. Suddenly a completely different tune appears. Eusebius is saying, maybe I could be happy after all. You never know. Then Florestan takes over again, off it goes again, and it builds up to where you would expect the music of the beginning to come back. But it doesn't. There's another pause. And this time the strings play very soft, quiet music, happy music this time. And it's another quotation, this time from Beethoven. It's a quotation from Beethoven's song An die ferne Geliebte, to the distant beloved. I think he's talking to Clara, as he does so often in his music, and saying, "Thank you, Clara, for looking after me in my illness." And from that point onwards, Eusebius and Florestan, the two sides of Schumann's personality, are ever more linked. There are quotations from the first movement, there are quotations from the second, from the slow movement. It's a fantastic ending to a very, very great movement. It's one of the few really psychological movements in music before Mahler. No wonder Mahler loved these symphonies. He spent a lot of time trying to improve the orchestration. He didn't succeed. The orchestration is just fine. So this is an amazing symphony, one of my favorites, and I hope you enjoy it. Who knows? You might.